Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I would like to thank to my supervisor, Mr. Yana, S.Pd M.Hum, and Ms. Cynantia, M.M.Pd, who has guided me and helping me to complete my research paper. And before we move to the next slide, let me introduce myself. My name is Suci Naffisil Kurba. I am an English education student 2018. English Education Study Program, Faculty of Language Education, IKIP Siliwangi. This video is a requirement of final project for Sarjana Pendidikan Degree English Education. So, my final project under title Developing Workbook through Canva application in Learning Writing Recount for Junior High School. And in this research consists 5 content. The first one, background of the research. The second one, objective of the research. The third one, methodology, that consists of research design, subject of the research, and instrument. And the fourth one, research, the last, conclusion. For the first one, I want to describe background of the research. For the ideal condition, the most important thing in learning a language is writing, with writing being the determining factor for someone to be fluent in a language. As an educator, must be able to process any material or teaching material needed by student. Therefore, it is necessary to have teaching material that encourage students to be interested in learning to write. But for current condition, for the 8th grade English learning, it is not effective due to the lack of the student writing skill. This making students find it difficult to write English text and understand the meaning. Based on this explanation, the researcher has proposed to developing workbook through Canva application in learning writing recount text for junior high school. The next slide is about objective of the research. The first one, to find the process of the research of developing a workbook through Canva application in learning writing recount text for junior high school. The second one, to know the feasibility of developing a workbook through Canva application in learning writing recount text for junior high school. The third one, to know student response toward the teaching material that's developed. And the last, to know the obstacle that found developing a workbook through Canva application in learning writing recount text for junior high school. Next slide, methodology. This research was used to research and development work and goal steps which have been modified by research. The steps are research and information collecting, planning, developing the preliminary form of a product revision, preliminary field testing, and main field testing. For subject of the research, preliminary field testing 8 students and main field testing 24 students. And for instrument of the research, the first one, observation, the second one, validation sheet, the third one, questionnaire, and the last, interview. And the last, data analysis technique. Researcher use quantitative data and qualitative data. The researcher need the observation while researchers are conducting the practical field experience activities, and this observation was carried out by researcher to find out what student needs. The validation sheet is needed to measure the validity of the product of the researcher developed. In this validation sheet is filled out by 3 validators, which consists of supervisor, and English teacher. The questionnaires to obtain information from students. And also the researcher used interview to obtain the information from student and the content of 5 questions, which are this activity to 5 students. The next slide is result and the process and result of developing workbook through canva application in learning writing recount text for junior high school. And the researcher used text from Berg and Gall, which has been modified by researcher for answering research question. For number 1 is research and information collection. For identify problems that occur in school through interviews with students and teachers. And the second, planning. Design the product of making this workbook is designed to make students more interesting and enthusiastic about learning. In the third, about developing preliminary work of product. Researchers have designed a product with the cover content their student workbook writing recount text and pictures, and found the material names and school in the cover determining learning objective and basic competence, and got the suggestion for validator as a simple product format, collection correctly structured sentence, use verb 1 and add underlined under the verb. The second one, the feasibility of developing workbook through canva application in learning writing recount text for junior high school. The researcher used the validation sheet to measure the feasibility of a product, which is validated by 3 validators. For the first validator, 81% data is category valid. The second validator, 82% data category valid, and the last validator, as an English teacher, 18% data category valid. And based on the result of the 3 validators, they show that the student workbook that have been developed are suitable for use and validator value of the material expert is valid. The third one, student responses toward the material that was developed, namely workbook. The researcher used questionnaire and interview to find student responses. And the first one, preliminary testing, offset 98% data category valid, and the last, midfield testing, offset 83% data category valid. Based on the table above, this workbook media reaches the good or decent category. It can be seen the average value in the table above, which research 98% and 83% is included in feasibility category. Sugiono 2018 95. The percentage of analysis data obtained is then interpreted into the valid category. And the last one, the obstacle of developing workbook. Researcher experiences difficulties when making product design because they use application on mobile phone. Then, at the time of development, researchers had difficulty presenting the product in front of the class. And at the time, the post-development, researcher experiences difficulties when collecting data in form of questionnaire in interviews. The last in my content is conclusion. The first one, this research used research and development of Berg and Gall step, which has been modified by researcher. The steps are research and information collecting, planning, develop preliminary form of the product revision, preliminary field testing, and main field testing. And the second one, the feasibility of the product that the researcher developed was measured using a validation set filled out by 3 validators. And the results obtained are valid. The third one, student response from the use of the workbook is very good, as can be seen from the result of questionnaire and interviews. And the last, in developing workbook, there are rare obstacles that were found. The obstacles found were confusing about product design, difficulty finding image references, and also difficulty explaining how students use the Canva application. Thank you so much. I think that's all my presentation. I really apologize if I have a lot of my mistaken. And thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.